ITV Ghana, your world of quality entertainment.
19 minutes after 8, you're live on Happy 98.9 FM. And so are you also live on ETV Live on Facebook as well, on our handle Happy 989 FM. And we're having a conversation about, China, Ghana relations 60 years on. And all morning when we started the conversation on the Happy Morning Show, I indicated the fact that on the 5th of July, 1960, some 2 days ago, 60 years of relations between China was established. And this morning we want to talk about the relationship, how far it's traveled, the various highlights of the relationship, what we can look to as people of these two countries, and then look at and build upon the challenges we have faced, the successes we have chalked over the period. And so that's going to be the focus of our conversation this morning, even as I host these great men to have this conversation. For the purposes of those who just join us now on the conversation on GBC News, Happy FM, and then on Facebook, I'd like to introduce my guest, but I'll first have a conversation with His Excellency Ambassador Boatin, who is Ghana's ambassador to China, and then when I'm done with him, then we'll have the main discussion with Mr. Zhu Jing, who is the Chargé d'Affaires of the Chinese Embassy, Accra, and then Musa Frimpong as well. But I'll not be hosting the conversation alone. GBC's own Abdul Hai Mumen is going to co-host the conversation with me, and so they are also on standby. So we are starting the conversation. Once more, welcome, gentlemen, to the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, so Ambassador, I will start the conversation with you. 5th of July was 60 years that Ghana and China have had a relationship. How has the relationship been so far?
I think the relationship has been very good, one of mutual respect and trust, and it has developed over the years. And I think presently Ghana and China are enjoying very cordial relationships, and it's one of the best. The relationship started during the time of our founding president, Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and Chairman Mao Zedong, the founder of New China. I think the conversations between them started earlier. China had just come out of the war, and New China was just beginning, and we are also on the path to independence. However, we did not establish full diplomatic relations until 1960, when Ghana became a full republic. We became a republic on the 1st of July, and on the 5th of July, the first Chinese ambassador to Ghana, Mr. Wang, presented his credentials to Osajifo, and our ambassador also took post in Peking a few months later. At that time, the conversation in the world was different. At that time, there were only about 23 African countries that were independent. And Ghana and China worked together, especially to help a lot of these other countries during the period of decolonization. Also, China also had its own problems. I think one of the major highlights was that Ghana, led by President Nkrumah at that time, was in the forefront of helping to restore China's legitimate right as the, with Beijing being the true representative of the Chinese people. Because at that time, there was the struggle between Taipei and Beijing. And President Kwame Nkrumah led those discussions. So one of the highlights was that Ghana was in the forefront to restore the new China's role as the legitimate representative of the Chinese people, and he was very successful. I mean, in 1971, Ghana was one of the countries that voted in favor, and ex-President Kufuor, who was then Deputy Foreign Minister, cast one of those historic votes. So that's one of the highlights. Apart from that, over the years, we have collaborated on several major important issues. And over the last 15 years, China has also been in the forefront of helping us in terms of our infrastructure development. There are a lot of projects in Ghana today that have been done through Chinese government grant or Chinese commercial loans, examples being Bui Dam. We also have the projects that are going on today, like the Jamestown Fishing Harbor. We have the technical education institutions, which are all being built around the country. And we have the projects that we're also doing with Sino Hydro. So it's been one of political collaboration, one of commercial collaboration, one of people-to-people collaboration. And I would say that it's going very well. And right now, we're doing very, very well in terms of our relationship. Hello?
All right. Okay, so I already introduced my co-host for the conversation, and I am hosting the conversation with my brother, Abdul Momin. And he's also got a few questions he would be asking His Excellency Ambassador Edward Boateng even as we progress. So, Momin, I'll come to you.
To be collaborating with Happy FM as well as ETV to bring this very important interview to our viewers. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, for accepting to speak with us here. Moving on, you've just told us about Ghana-China relations dating back 60 years now. But Your Excellency, we also want to find out, in every relationship, there must be a balance. So far, it appears the balance seems to favor China, especially when it comes to trade. You see that China has an advantage of about $1.9 billion in terms of trade. But on our part as Ghanaians, and you being the ambassador, what is being done to ensure that moving forward, that Ghana exports more to China so as to balance this trade relations?
Well, when you say it's always been in favor of China, I mean, I think you also need to look at the historical records. There was a point in time in the 1960s when Ghana had an advantage, not in terms of trade, but even in terms of political discourse. Now, when we talk about trade, yes, that's true, but it hasn't always been in favor of China. I think right now, the way for us to balance it in terms of trade is for us to take the president's One District, One Factory initiative very serious. Where we have an advantage in terms of agriculture. If we can produce more, we can sell more to China in terms of food. And I think that's an area that we can work closely with the Chinese to develop our land. Ghana has a lot of arable land. I mean, we have over 26 water bodies. If you look at China as a continent, and you look at Ghana in terms of percentage, we have more arable land than they, even if they have vast land. So we need to improve our agricultural practices. And this is one area that we're working with Chinese companies to see how we can improve cultivation of our land. Now, once we're able to produce more food, we can export more. I think we also have the resources, gold, and I think natural resources. And that's why the president is very keen that now we're not going to export our raw materials. If we can refine our bauxite, we get more money, more value when we export it. It's one of the areas that we're also exploring. So yes, it's, in any relationship, at any point in time, one may have the advantage, but we also have to take up the challenge, produce more, refine our raw materials. Over the years, we've been exporting raw materials. We've been exporting the raw cocoa. If we can produce more cocoa powder, we can produce more cocoa liquor, we can produce more refined cocoa chocolate, and we export them to China, we will help improve the balance of trade. So these are all areas that we are looking at. And we have had discussions over the last 2 years, whereby the Chinese are open to helping us to export more. The challenge is that we need to deepen and improve our capacity. because China is a big country, and most of the time the orders that will come in are huge, and we don't have the capacity to meet them. So we also have to deepen our industrial capacity and our ability to meet these orders when eventually the doors are open for us.
Thank you very much. I'll go over to Sami at the moment. But Your Excellency, I have a last question when Sami is done with you, and that would have to do with the situation in respect of Ghanaians in China at the moment. But that will be after Sami comes your way with the next question.
Your Excellency, we can't have a conversation about trade without thinking about the impact COVID-19 has had on both countries. The fact that there were lockdowns. As we speak now, we've still locked our borders. Let's have a conversation about how this has impacted on the relationships between these two countries. How has it impacted us?
Well, I think at the beginning of the COVID-19, Ghana was one of the countries that offered support to China. I mean, if you recall, the Greater Accra Regional Minister made a donation of masks to the Chinese embassy at that time. Subsequently, the Chinese have also responded in a very big way to our situation. The Chinese government themselves have sent a lot of PPEs and testing kits to us. The Jack Ma Foundation also, which is the Alibaba Chinese-owned company, was the first countries to send us a donation of test kits to help us. And we have exchanged a lot of expertise with Chinese doctors in the forefront. So there's been a lot of knowledge sharing, and we are working very closely. In terms of how it's impacted the economies, obviously, China has been able to deal with COVID-19 better than any country I know of so far, because of the systems they have in place, and also because they have the history. They had a SARS epidemic in 2003, and they learned from that. And as a result, they put in place a very robust public healthcare system, which has been able to help them weather this pandemic. So as far as China is concerned, the impact on their economy may not be as deep as probably other countries in the world. I think on the Ghana side, we haven't done badly. If you look at the entire African continent, we are one of the countries that is doing the most testing and also has a lot of protocols in place. Where we are challenged is that people are not as disciplined as the people in China, because in China, wearing a mask, people don't have to tell you to wear your mask. You have to wear your mask. But when you read about the reports back home that now people even have to be fined and persuaded to wear a mask, it's worrying. So those are some of the things that we can learn, that, this is a very serious situation in which we all find ourselves. And your behavior determines my well-being. My behavior determines your well-being. So why should we not all be disciplined? And that is where maybe the Chinese are one step ahead of us. Also, they use technology a lot. I mean, with your mobile phone, your health status can be determined anywhere you go in China. Before you enter any building, your temperature will be taken, or sometimes you have to scan your barcode. We also need to use technology to help with the contact tracing. But going forward, I also believe that COVID-19, like most of these worldwide issues, First World War, the Spanish flu of the late 19th century, resets the clock. The clock is now at zero. So whether you are China, whether you are Ghana, whether you are the US, we are all on the starting blocks. We are all on the starting blocks at ground zero. And it depends on how fast you can run. So we also have to take the opportunity that has been offered by COVID-19. Sometimes I see it as an opportunity to do things differently and to also learn to run fast and faster this time, because nobody has an advantage. Whoever thought a year ago that a country like the US would be facing this problem with controlling the virus? but it is on its knees struggling. Ghana hasn't done that badly. If a year ago somebody had said we'll do better than maybe the US, probably most people would have laughed. But it shows you that there's a new norm, and they call it the new normal. So we are all on the starting blocks. The clock has been reset to zero. And what we need to do is to work hard, partner with friendly countries like China, use their technology, learn from their expertise to improve the capacity of our people, improve the capacity of our industries, improve the capacity of our institutions, so that we can also get ahead of the curve. That's how I see it. So I don't see COVID-19 as totally negative. I see it as the clock being reset. But we cannot take advantage of it if we continue to be indisciplined. Why does the president have to tell you to wear your mask? You know you have to wear your mask. You know that when you have a temperature of above 37.3, you don't have to go out. Why does somebody have to tell you? So I think for the challenge for you in media is to also make people responsible. It's not always that we have to ask people to do it for us. We have to be responsible because that clock has been set at zero. If this time we are left behind, we have ourselves to blame. That's how I see it.
As much as a tabula rasa opportunity is offered at all of us, I mean, countries which have been hit by this disease, in terms of figures, in terms of quantum, what's been the degree of loss for Ghana and China for that matter?
Well, so far, none of the projects that we are doing have been cancelled. There's going to be a slowdown in the execution of some of these projects, but it will be done. We are in discussions. Last week, the Minister of Finance had a conference call with the NDRC, which is the overarching body that oversees Chinese investment outside, and it was positive. So I do not see a slowdown or a cancellation of projects. However, we need to engage on some of these discussions in terms of some of the financial issues. But when the clock is reset, it doesn't mean that things will stop. Things will go on, but it will be done differently. That's how I see it. I think we also really need to evaluate our priorities and see what is most important and bring that forward. That's how I see it. But as far as we are concerned, all the projects that we are working on, yes, some of them have slowed down. We haven't met our targets, but eventually they will be done. Again, it's an issue of how we see time. I think the way we see time, sometimes in the Chinese, I like the way Asians look at time. Time for them is ad infinitum. Time doesn't stop. And therefore, when you are negotiating with them, they look at 10 years ahead. We are always looking at 4 years ahead or 2 years ahead. And I think that is also a problem because sometimes it also results us in doing bad deals because we want to close it as quickly as possible. But the truth is that time will not stop. The sun will rise and the sun will set. But we believe that the sun may not rise again tomorrow. It will always rise and it will always set. And I think these are things that we also need to look at in our negotiations. Because sometimes people will tell me that, why hasn't this thing happened? Negotiations take time. Sometimes it may take 2 years, it may take 3 years. And once you've even finished the negotiation, you need an implementation plan, which will take you another long period. But once you start building, it takes a very short period of time if everything is in place. But we start building before we start thinking. And that is a problem that we have, So we should also look at time, the way we look at time. For me, time doesn't stop. So the fact that I don't get it today does not mean that I will not get it tomorrow. The only thing that can stop you from getting it is if you die. But if you take care of yourself, you'll be there. And sometimes even if you die, your children will benefit from it. And that's the way we have to look at life. So something that I may not get today doesn't mean that I cannot put in place the right starting blocks for my children or my great-grandchildren to benefit from it, because the Boateng legacy is not going to die. I will die, my children will have children, they will also have children, and it goes on. So it's also an issue of how we're looking at life, and that's why I think sometimes in the world, people are in a panic about COVID-19. Yes, it is true people are going to die. But also the truth is that every day that we lose people, people are also giving birth. So there is a replacement mechanism. And that's how I see it.
Woman.
Yes, Your Excellency, briefly, can we now zoom into the individual lives and the welfare of individual Ghanaians in China at the moment? How many of them have been affected, and have we recorded any Ghanaian deaths? Can you tell us?
Well, fortunately for us, no Ghanaian was affected by COVID-19. I mean, not one Ghanaian got infected in China. And that's because people here pretty much applied and lived by the protocols. People were very disciplined. And I'm hoping that 268 of our compatriots came back home over the weekend. And my message to them was that going back home, you have to educate people about being disciplined, because with discipline, you can control this virus. You can really control this virus. But without discipline, you cannot. So we didn't have any case, and I'm very happy about that.
Mm. All right, but there were initial reports, and we spoke to you on that as well on a previous occasion, where Black Africans and some Ghanaians in particular were turned away from shops and so on, because in fact, they were prevented from having access to public facilities. Has the situation improved?
I think we have to put that in context. This issue did not happen in the whole of China. It happened in Guangzhou. Guangdong province is a province of 100 million people. There were 4 districts in Guangzhou, and those 4 districts are where we have a lot of Africans who live there. Now, what happened was that some West Africans, not Ghanaians, Ghanaians were not involved in it, came to Guangzhou. And again, it's a discipline we talk about. At that time, when you come, you are supposed to self-quarantine for 14 days. They didn't. And unfortunately, they got infected. They were infected. So they took a taxi, and that taxi driver got infected. Now, the Guangzhou officials at that time did a random test of taxi officials in that district, and then realized that some taxi drivers were infected. So when they asked them, they started doing the back tracing. This particular taxi driver said he also took some Africans, and probably that's how he got infected. So they back traced to these West Africans who at that time were lodging in a hotel. Unfortunately, when they went to the hotel, they were not there. So they followed them to a restaurant, which is heavily patronized by West Africans. Now, Ghanaians were not involved, but unfortunately, we are also from West Africa. So they realized at that restaurant that this West African, who is married to a Chinese, was also infected. Now, the rule in China right now is everywhere you go, you write your name and you leave your phone number. The restaurant was not doing that. So they couldn't determine who had been to the restaurant. So they decided that in order to stop the spread of the virus, they would test every Black African in those 4 districts. Now, the communication that went out was poor, and the Chinese authorities have accepted that, and they apologize. They should have explained to us in the missions, but because they panicked, because at that time, if you recall, Wuhan had been under lockdown, and that was just when Wuhan was coming out of lockdown, around April 8th. So the Guangzhou officials, and Guangzhou is the economic epicenter of China. But if you take Guangzhou's economy, it's bigger than the whole of sub-Saharan Africa combined. So they panicked that if they were not able to control it, then they would also be in the situation of Hubei province and Wuhan. So the word went out that they needed to test. Unfortunately, because the communication was poorly handled, the people who went out to do the testing made some mistakes, and we've engaged them on that, and I'm hoping that in future, those things will not happen again.
Thank you
So
very
what
much.
also happened, let me explain. So what happened was that the landlords, once they heard that, and some of these landlords also, here you have to pay tax. Some of these landlords were renting to people and they were not paying tax. There were a whole bunch of social issues. Said, hey, you're going to get me into trouble, and started evicting people. So the evictions did not come from the authorities, but from landlords. And invariably, we addressed that. Yes, there have been problems, and we are working with that to address it. So it wasn't like it was a targeted thing against us because we're Black, but I just wanted to give you the historical background. But those issues have been resolved.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. Sami will take over at this point.
A final question, and then we can sum up the conversation. I know you have a very busy schedule. It has to do with the point you made about businesses that have been started, contracts that have been started that have not been halted, but are still, being looked at. And in this respect, I'm referencing the Sino-Hydro deal. What's the status of that deal, and how much of it has come through for Ghana?
Sino-Hydro deal is on track. I mean, if you recall, the president cut the sword for the Tamale interchange. That project is going on, and we have 3 other projects which have also started. We are looking at getting approval for 6 other projects, hopefully by the end of this month, and that would complete phase 1. And then we would sit down again, led by the Ministry of Finance, to look at the next aspects of the program. But again, all this thing has been done in a matter of 2 years. In some places, this will take maybe 5 years or 6 years because these are varied projects and they are all big projects. So it's an issue of maybe we also as a government put undue pressure on ourselves to get these things done within a very short period. But the Sino-Hydro project is on track. And the Ghana GIADEC, which is handling the bauxite, is also on track. I also like to use this clarification that the Sino-Hydro project was not against them getting our bauxite. That is a totally different thing that is being handled differently. What we are going to do is to use the refined bauxite as payment once we pay for the Sino-Hydro projects. But yes, we have had some delays because of COVID-19, but none of those projects have been cancelled. So it is on track.
Ambassador Watson, well, thank you for your time this morning. And I know because of busy and tight schedules, you would have to excuse yourself in the course of our deliberations. But we're grateful you made time to speak to us this morning as we looked at 60 years of Ghana-China relationship.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So, Moment, I will come to you even as Ambassador Boateng excuses himself, and then we speak to Mr. Jing, and then my brother Musa on the angles we dealt with our ambassador.
Thank you very much, Sami, and Ambassador, thank you very much also for making time to join us here for this very important interview. Now we'll speak to Mr. Zhu Jing, who is the chargé d'affaires at the Chinese embassy here in Accra. We are grateful, sir, that you have been patient with us all throughout this morning as we were speaking with Ambassador to China there. 5th of July marked exactly 60 years of the beginning of the relationship between Ghana and China. Tell me, how did the Chinese embassy mark this day?
Good morning, everyone. This is Zhu Jing, the Charge d'Affaires of Chinese Embassy in Ghana. Yes, you mentioned that just 2 days ago, July 5th, marks the 60 years anniversary between Ghana and China to establish diplomatic relations. So this year is a very big year for China and Ghana. And both sides have prepared a series of celebrations at the beginning of this year for this 60th anniversary. And for embassy, we also prepare a series of celebrations. But unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, so far, many of these celebrations can't go as planned. So we quickly change our strategy and also celebrate this special year by fighting against the pandemic. So for the past several months, we support each other and offer very timely help to each other. As you mentioned, that what our embassy do for this. Just 2 days ago, on this very day of July 5th, my team in the embassy is quite busy working for this anniversary celebration. We got two special supplement in the daily newspapers, and we got a congratulative message from both President Xi Jinping, and also President Nana Akufo, and the congratulative message from two foreign ministers, His Excellency Mr. Wang Yi and His Excellency Her Honorable Bochwe. Yes, and also we got a special supplement with the support of His Excellency Baumia, the Vice President of the Ghana, and also His Excellency Edward Barton, the Ghanaian ambassador to China. We got a very fruitful supplement, and all these pictures and our congratulatory message from different circles of life in Ghana, both in Ghana and in Chinese community. So the supplement achieved a complete success. As an old Chinese saying goes, mountains and seas can't distance us from the common aspirations. 60 years ago, in the age of national liberation movement at the time sweeping Africa, the founder of the new China, the Chairman Mao Zedong and the President Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and other leaders of both countries to make the historic decisions to establish diplomatic relations. Over the past 60 years, political relations have been very increasingly consolidated, and our economic and trade cooperation is very impressive, actually. Right now, China is the biggest trading partner of Ghana and also the biggest investor. And also in terms of cultural and people-to-people contact exchanges, it's also very shining. And right now, Ghana have more than 6,500 Ghanaian students to study in China, and also ranking the second in the whole Africa. So in general, in my view, China-Ghana friendship is marching towards a very bright future. Right now, I can safely say we are standing on a notch higher. Thank you.
Sami, if you have any questions, you can come in at this point.
Well, prior to, Mr. Jin joining the conversation, I was speaking to Ambassador Boateng about the bit about trade and commerce and, the projects that are going on between China and Ghana. But I'd want to find out from Mr. Jin, in terms of economical, political, cultural relationship, some landmark projects and collaborative work we have done or the Chinese have done with Ghana. If you can just give us a fair idea of some of these projects that have been done.
Okay, of course. Actually, China and Ghana focus on economic cooperations in many fields. I mean, just to name a few, some landmark projects like the National Theatre, the Cape Coast Sports Stadium, the Ghana Research Reactor, the Atuabo Gas Processing Project, the Bui Dam, and the Pong Water Supplies Expansion Project, and also 1,000 boreholes in the whole Ghana, and the establishment and also future expansion of the University of Health and Allied Sciences in Ho. And it's so many, just to name a few. And in recent years, the ongoing Jamestown fishing port complex and another 10 fishing ports, and also upgrading 15 vocational training schools and many other infrastructures. And also, all of you, I think know that, just now you mentioned Sino Hydro project. I think we are making steady progress on that project also. So there are so many projects. And also, I think that the Chinese enterprises also value Ghana, and they just trying to cooperate with the Ghanaian local partners in various fields like infrastructure, energy, and manufacture, agriculture, aviation, real estate, so on and so forth. Just give you two examples. I went to Terma a few times. They're the Chinese electricity company called Shandong and Sogli Power Plant. They produce around 15 to 20 electricities of Ghanaian people need. And also the Africa World Airline, AWA, also invest by the Chinese and also their Ghanaian counterpart. All these enterprises, they also play an important role to trying to solve the power shortage or promote the interconnections within the Western African sub-region. And thank you.
All right, let me go to Musa and pick a comment from Musa on the submissions of Ambassador Boateng and then Mr. Jin on the aspect of business, being an entrepreneur and the kind of relationship that for 60 years Ghana, China have enjoyed. Musa, as an entrepreneur, what do you make of that relationship?
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I want to send this special congratulations message to the people of Ghana and also the people of China, and the good relationship and friendship we have had. I think over the years, China-Ghana relationship has been soaring very higher, especially in the past 2 decades, with a lot of economic front, education, and then the social aspect. So the figures are very high in terms of the investment and also the number of Ghanaian students studying in China. But yet again, there are a few imbalances that we need to address to make the relationship very strong, and also to avoid some of the occasional issues that we get when, especially you mentioned about the Guangzhou case and all that. If we are able to really deepen the people-to-people relationship and other fronts, then we are able to in future understand each other, know each other better, and able to undertake our economic activities. Because if you look at the case in Guangzhou and how it happened, it could have affected a lot of projects or a lot of investment that have been done over the years. So in as much as a lot has been achieved, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, especially how we as Ghanaians learn from China in terms of how they have lifted themselves from poverty over the past 3 decades. In our lifetime, it has been possible for China. So it's possible also if Ghana also strategically position and learn from China, then we could also advance very well, and the relationship will be much better in a form of win-win cooperation.
Musa, I'll come to you subsequently because you raised a very important issue about people-to-people relationships. So far, we've been talking about Ghana-China relations at the government level, but it's important that we also look at it from the people-to-people exchanges that take place on a daily basis. But that will be later in the conversation. I'll return to Mr. Jing now because, you see, 40 years ago, China was not where it is today, to the extent that China can extend a helping hand to countries such as Ghana. In the 70s, you introduced what you called the industrialization era, where you introduced a lot of the industries that are today driving the economy of China. In Ghana, we have introduced something similar, the one district, one factory policy, and there is a policy that supports students to have senior high school for free. Now, given the fact that China has already been through this process, how are you sharing that experience with the Ghanaian authorities?
Yes, indeed, we fully support Ghana's development efforts. Like, we all know that the Ghanaian government has many initiatives, like 1D, 1F, or free senior high school, and plant and food and jobs, so on and so forth. and we all live in Ghana, we fully understand that the necessity to do so, because especially from our own experience, we focus highly on the industrialization and also the education, because we believe that these two fields are the key, and all we can say it is essential to any country's development. The Chinese embassy here in Ghana is very much willing to share the China's development experience with our Ghanaian friends and do our best to attract more investment for Ghana's industrialization and also the education. Right now, China is the biggest trading partners and the investors, and also the biggest providers of human resources training to Ghana. Last year, the Chinese invest so many projects, like invested in seasoning factories, diapers factories, and also the ceramic factory went into production. All these factories, first of all, to enhance the local employment and technology transfer, and also in total to trying to enhance Ghanaians' industrialization industry. So the embassy have grant also in a people-to-people contact. The embassy grant the government scholarship for more than 300 Ghanaian students. Just to remember, this all full government scholarship for degrees, and also for other short-term training. By short-term training, I mean about from 3 months to 6 months. Every year we provide 1,000 opportunities to Ghanaians, and I believe all this can try to help assist our Ghanaian friends to get a better infrastructure, also say industrialization and also education. So in general, to boost the Ghanaians' development in the future. Thank you.
And Sami, if you allow me, I'll just do a follow-up with Musa on the issue he raised about people-to-people exchanges. Musa, so you are a businessman based in China right now. Of course, we know that the duty of the two governments is to provide that enabling environment for people like you to operate within, but you can certainly not operate effectively if your relationships as individual citizens is not healthy. Now, tell me about that relationship that exists between Ghanaians and individual Chinese. How good or bad is it?
Thank you so much for that question. I think one of the things that really struck me was when I arrived in China the first time in September 2017 for my studies, and I started going out to observe or see what is happening in the Chinese societies. So when you go out, you meet a lot of other people like Americans, the Europeans, the Asians are really out there engaging, even at the business level. But I really didn't see a lot of Africans or Ghanaians out there on the streets of Beijing or in places there. Important conversations were happening in terms of even economic or other fronts. So that's what really got us into what we are doing today. And the relationship, I think one of the things in China that you have to observe is that China is a completely different system. You are facing to learn a new language that maybe going to take a lot of time. And the cultural differences is also very wide. There's a lot of differences that we need to also overcome. So when you look at the obstacles in terms of trying to engage with each other, then you might give up. But one of the things we have done on our part has really been to concentrate our work in China around that, because we saw that for trade or business to really go on effectively, people need to know each other, people need to understand each other. So our work over the past years has really been how to get Ghanaians really connected to the Chinese people. So we've implemented a lot of projects all over China, and fortunately, I think one of the strategies personally I took was that in China, I want to make Chinese friends, because that was so vital for me that I don't come to China and mingle only with Ghanaians or Africans. I have to make Chinese friends and learn about Chinese culture and all these things about. So that's one of the important steps that each person has to take, because we are in a foreign land. You don't expect the Chinese people to make that huge conscious effort to connect with you. You as a foreigner, it is your responsibility to make that effort to connect with the people that the new home that you have. So I think in terms of cooperation or people-to-people interaction, we don't have a lot of platforms that allow that to happen in China. And we urge both the Chinese side, both the Chinese and the Ghanaian government and the business people to understand that without that deepened people-to-people relationship, all what we are building in terms of infrastructure or investment or trade can all come down in one day when things go wrong. So that's one of the things we hope that over the coming years, our governments and our businesses will also place more emphasis on to deepen the people-to-people relationship that the two countries can enjoy.
Thank you very much. And if you just joined the conversation, we earlier spoke to Mr. His Excellency Edward Boateng, Ghana's ambassador to China. Mr. Zhu Jing is on right now. He's the chargé d'affaires at the Chinese embassy. And Musa Frimpong is a founder. He's the founder of Japa Africa, and he's based in China. My name is Abdul Hai, and I'm doing this interview with Samuel Shen. Samuel, you may want to take over at this point.
Well, I would want to stay a little bit longer with Musa about the exploits he's made in China, the opportunities and what the young folks in Ghana can learn from him. Because I believe that as an entrepreneur in Ghana here, one of the fundamental challenges people face is that of access to funding and technology. How different is the situation in China? And what can we learn as a country from the Chinese? Musa.
Thank you so much, and that's one of the difficulty because you are in China where maybe Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all these things we are used to in terms of our social interactions or our business interactions. You might not have access to them in China, but that has succeeded in pushing a lot of people into, let me say, personal recession on themselves. Like you are in a, so one of the appreciation that as individuals, and that's one of the things our education system also have to correct, is that to prepare people, to prepare our students to be global citizens. Because today, opportunities that you have in Ghana can equally be accessed by people anywhere, any part of the world. So we really need to work and correct some of these things. But in terms of lessons, I think one of the important things is engagement. And I think that's one of the things I really focused on when I was in China, how to engage really with the Chinese people. And in terms of funding or capital, I think when you look at China environment, it's very easy today to start a business if you have if you're able to overcome those obstacles that I've already mentioned, the language, the people-to-people interactions, and all that. If you're able to overcome those things, it's very easy to maybe access funding or depending on where you are coming from also. But in terms of funding or the technology and all that, it's very widespread everywhere in China. With your tax system, everything else is virtual, and almost everything is virtual in China. So you can virtually sit at the comfort of your home and do a lot of things. You don't need to go out of your room to engage or to do business in China. So technology is really, really, really high. And when I leave China and I enter Africa, I ask myself, where are we joking or are we serious about what we are doing? So the difference is so wide. And personally, that's what I think as Africans, and the Chinese people are really, really ready to teach or to let go of some of this knowledge. Tomorrow, like this, we are hosting health experts from China and Ghana to have that conversation about the COVID management. And they are really ready to engage with our side and expand some of their knowledge to us. But yet again, when we come to our side, it's really difficult to overcome those obstacles. So I believe Chinese environment, there's a lot to learn from: technology, innovation, startups, funding. All these stuff are really on a different level. And it's not only Africans who are competing in China or Ghanaians. The Americans are trooping in there, the Europeans are trooping in there, And so everybody is there. So before you can really, as an African student or African young person in China, before you can really have access to this thing, you really need to let go of a lot of things and engage the Chinese society.
I would ask my final question, and that goes to Mr. Jin, and it's in connection with a very, very, very important issue in Ghana, which has to do with mining in Ghana, and the fact that we have had our Chinese brothers and sisters, being involved in mining here in Ghana, where a lot of Chinese have been arrested, some have been deported, being engaged in illegal mining, and the state of affairs of our water bodies and our vegetation. Mr. Jim, what does the Chinese government make of the activities of Chinese in Ghana when it comes to the mining sector?
I just want to take this opportunity just to reiterate that China's position on the illegal mining is very clear. We strongly oppose any illegal mining in any country. Also, we strongly oppose any Chinese nationals to engage the illegal minings, either in Ghana or in any other countries. And also we respect and support the Ghanaian government's effort to solve the problem according to the law and the regulations. If illegal miners were captured and they have to be repatriated according to the Ghanaian law, we have no objection.
All right, Mumen, that was my final question.
Okay, and then I'll wrap it all up with Mr. Jin by following up on that question as well, because we're just wondering now, the new normal is that COVID-19 is the new normal, and that's what we've been made to understand now. Moving forward, how will Ghana and China relations be affected because of COVID-19?
Yes, in my view, the pandemic changed the world to be a quite different situation. Right now the pandemic make us realize that there is only one Earth, and we are the community with a shared future. We are a big family because the pandemic, they respect no borders or no continent. They just go everywhere it wants. So in this new era of globalization, countries and the people have connected closely as never before. So no one could live alone. So since more and more non-traditional security issues like COVID-19 and some others will arise, so there's a growing need for us to working together. And at such critical moment right now, just not long ago, the Chinese President Xi Jinping, just chaired the extraordinary China-Africa Summit on solidarity against COVID-19 and deliver a keynote speech, further solidifying the consensus fighting COVID-19 pandemic together, and also promoting new development of China-Africa cooperation, injecting new driving force into upholding multilateralism and global anti-pandemic cooperation. And there are many detailed measures for this visual summit. If you have interest, you can just take a look at the outcome of the summit. Well, I believe in terms of China and Ghana relations, with the joint efforts of the people of the two countries, I firmly believe that we can turn this pandemic, this very danger, into opportunities. In China, we have a word called 危机, which means sometimes a danger comes, they also bring us opportunities. So we should take this danger, trying to transform it into opportunities to make more contributions to build a more closer China-Africa and China-Ghana relations, to build a better community with a shared future. Thank you.
And if you just joined the conversation, you are catching us at the tail end where this special conversation where we've been having this morning with His Excellency Edward Boateng, Ghana's ambassador to China, Mr. Zhu Jing, chargé d'affaires at the Chinese Embassy, and Musa Frimpong, founder Diapa Africa. He is based in China as well. It's a collaboration between GBC, Happy FM, and ETV as well. And my name is Mumin. I've been doing this together with Samuel Shen on the Happy FM side. Sammy, take it over from now.
Yeah, one last
moment. I will thank you for the good job done this morning. I'd like to thank Mr. Jin for making time to speak to us this morning. But I can't end without speaking to Musa to pick his final comment as to what he has for young Ghanaians who follow the conversation. Musa, your final words.
Thank you so much. And I also want to send a special appreciation to Ambassador Boateng and Mr. Shin for the wonderful conversation, Mr. Jin. So Ambassador Boateng, I think some of the things we don't mention is when things go wrong, but when things are getting better, we forget to actually say what I think. Over the past, I think I went to China when Ambassador Boateng also had come, and I've seen a lot of changes when I interact with Ghanaians who were there before and now. I see a lot of changes, engagement with the Ghana embassy and then between the two embassies as well. So I must commend Ambassador Boateng for all the support been given, because if you look at Ghanaian entrepreneurs in China or students, everybody is doing a lot of good works across China, and that is courtesy of the support that we get from the embassy and Ambassador Boateng himself. And I want to also say that the students and the young people especially, China, if you're in China especially, there's a lot that you need to pick from China and bring it back home. And I think that's the reason why you went there. And those of us who are here, it's not all lost. There's a lot of things we need to change. There's a lot of things we need to learn from Chinese development model. So I urge all of us to take this relationship very serious, Ghana-China relationship, and then contribute to deepening it, and so that it will benefit both of us in the end. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Sir, thank you very much. We would thank at this point Mr. Zhu Jin, who is the chargé d'affaires of the Chinese embassy in Accra. We would thank His Excellency Edward Boateng, Ghana's ambassador to China. Musa Frimpong, that you just heard speaking, is the founder of Diapa Africa. And my own colleague and brother, Abdul Hai Mumen, of GTV, my brother, I'm grateful. This has been a collaboration between Happy FM, ETV Ghana, and GBC News. We thank you, the listeners, both on Facebook and all the other social media platforms, for making this possible. Our producers at both ends, we thank all of you. On that note, till we do this another time, I wish you the very best of the day.
Thank you,
Sammy.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
ETV Ghana, your world of quality entertainment.